Flying enemies are one of the hardest things to get right in tower defense games. When well designed, they can add a new layer of strategy to a game, but when poorly executed, they can frustrate players, cause rage quitting, and lead to the destruction of high quality mobile devices.
Oh no!
When I was making Fruit Defense, I knew that I wanted to have flying candy so that I could add more variety and challenge to my game. But as I created these candy, I faced several design problems and technical issues. Today, I'll be walking you through how I solved these problems and added flying enemies into my game. Hey everyone, I'm Edge, and welcome to another Fruit Defense devlog. One of the problems with flying enemies in tower defense games is that usually they can only be hit by certain towers. Now, this by itself isn't really an issue, but I've noticed that it tends to lead to me feeling like I'm basically playing two games at the same time. I'll be setting up my defenses for the normal enemies, and then suddenly have to switch gears and build an air defense to deal with flying enemies. Some of you might like this alternating playstyle, but I don't enjoy it. I knew that I wanted to avoid having this in Fruit Defense, so I came up with a way of giving the player a new option for defeating flying enemies. I added pillars that they would be able to put their fruit on so that they could hit flying candy. These pillars are one of the mechanics that I'm most excited about in my game. They give the player the ability to turn any tower into an anti-air tower. But because of the limited amount of pillars, they need to choose which fruit to put on them wisely. However, to make it so that the player wouldn't have to rely solely on pillars for dealing with flying enemies, I created a dedicated air defense fruit, the watermelon. It attacks with rapid fire and can only hit flying candy, unless upgraded with gravity seeds. This fruit would give the player multiple options for dealing with airborne enemies. When I designed the flying candy themselves, I didn't create new types of candy. Instead, I created a gumball balloon sprite that I could attach to regular candy to make them fly. I felt like this fit in with the overall theme of the game, since it uses a gumball to create flying enemies, not something like wings or thrusters, which wouldn't have made sense in the world of Fruit Defense. When the candy were attached to the balloon, they would move at the same speed and would behave in the exact same way, except that they would be immune to grounded attacks. I also added an animation to make them bob up and down in the air, and a shadow on the ground under them. When I created the flying candy in the Godot game engine, I had to solve several problems. First, I needed to make sure that they were always visible in front of everything else. I did this by changing their z-index property. This added a little bit of depth into the game. I also needed to figure out how I was going to tell the game when to send flying candy or not. I did this by adding an option into my level editor that would save the candy as flying candy. This made setting up waves of flying enemies as simple as pushing a button. Setting up the pillars that you could put fruit on also had interesting challenges. I had to make the fruit be able to tell when it was on a pillar, which I did with a collision shape. This led to a weird issue where you could put fruit on water because they still thought they were on a hill. I made a video about how I fixed this, but I basically had to check for collisions in the exact same frame that I moved with the fruit. Once the fruit detected that it was on a pillar, I would move its sprite up a few pixels and change its z-index to draw in front of other fruit. It would also be able to target flying candy when checking for collisions. And so, after lots of trial and error, I was able to set up flying enemies in a way that would hopefully add more fun and strategy into Fruit Defense, and not cause the destruction of any mobile phones.
Oh no!
That's it for now. I'll see you in the next one. Flying enemies are one of the hardest things to get right in tower defense games. When well designed, they can add a new layer of strategy to a game, but when poorly executed, they can cause frustration,